Good morning and welcome to another episode of Grand Central Station the Station with Central Ideas. This is Jack Emery Lunt, and I'm recording this about about 3 something hours after the first one, mainly because my summer schedule is a bit rocky, so I wanted to record a couple extra episodes, but also because I wanted to touch back on what I had talked about in the first episode, which was in relation to Parkland. I wanted to go more into depth on the Second Amendment, my views on the Second Amendment, my opinions regarding gun control, what measures I see on gun control, uh, and why some gun control is ineffective, why some is. So let's just jump right into it. Starting with the founder's vision on, or at least the reasoning behind the Second Amendment. So there is this really weird concept that nobody seems to understand. People who are I would say I'm definitely more pro gun rights than pro gun control. I am pro gun. I'm pro reason and like actually reasonable gun control. But the purpose of the Second Amendment is very clear and very incredibly important. So the entire purpose of the Second Amendment, it baffles me that nobody seems to understand this. The Second Amendment has nothing to do with crime. And this is what I don't understand. Every single person that says, you know, what are the reasons? I mean, to the gun control advocates, you need to make a stronger argument than this because I see everyone making the same argument. Guns are used to either create or curb crime, depending on what side you are. I hear people on the left saying, uh, guns, guns are made to kill people, guns create crime, and then you have people saying, no, armed people stop crime. So guns are just one side says it's for crime, the other side says to stop crime. It's not either of them. The Second Amendment has literally nothing to do with crime. That's a like a side portfolio. There is nothing. There are two reasons. I mean, I guess you could kind of consider this a crime, but there are two reasons for the Second Amendment. The first one is personal self-defense, and everyone, I hear a lot of gun control advocates say the same thing. You want basically just to own a gun for the sole purpose of owning a gun, and that it's America's gun nut culture. That is not the reason to own a gun in your house. I don't own a gun. I probably will be. I'm not sure. I will most likely have some form of firearm as I grow older, but at the moment, I am perfectly fine not having a gun. And many other people are as well. But the thing is that you need to have the option to physically be able to carry a gun, and the reasoning is incredibly important. The answer is prevention of government tyranny, and I hesitate to say that without a little bit of build up into any kind of explanation, but I needed to say something, or else I was just going to keep rambling forever. There are two reasons for gun control, or for the right to own a weapon, as known by the founders and John Locke. The first reason is for personal self-defense. If the police are not there to protect you, if the military is not there to protect you, you must be able to protect yourself. If someone barges into your house, now that is crime, but that's not really what I was talking about when I'm talking about like crime overall versus one on one. But you need a gun for self defense and the defense of your family. But the most important reason, and this is the most important reason, and this is the reason that no one talks about, is the is that an armed population is the strongest preventative measure against government tyranny par none. The reason that Adolf Hitler, first thing he did, disarm the population. Mao disarmed the population. Stalin disarmed the population. North Korea, I don't think there's even any guns allowed in North Korea besides that held by their army. But every major event of severe civil human rights being violated by your government always is preceded by a disarmed population. The entire purpose of the Second Amendment is for the government to fear the people. And this is why it gets really cloudy when it comes to gun rights and when it comes to gun control. As far as I understand it, it's like in 1986, the government and I personally, as a constitutionalist, I disagree with this, but as a fundamental level, I do agree with this. 1986, the government banned the manufacturing and sale of banned the manufacturing of all automatic weapons and created a strict registry for all license. It is incredibly difficult to have an automatic weapon in the United States. It's effectively banned, and I don't know if he's actually done it yet, but Trump was talking about banning the bump stocks, which also I agree with. Uh, Fundamentally, I agree with banning assault, not as an assault weapon. Let me be very clear: the actual definition of assault weapon is a weapon that can fire as you hold down the trigger. An AR-15 is not an assault weapon. Semi-automatic weapons are not assault weapons. It doesn't matter what color they are. It doesn't matter what attachments they have besides the bump stock. And that is why I disagree with and that is why I agree with banning the bump stock. But those are not assault weapons. Assault weapons in America are already banned. This is not a this is not a debate. Assault weapons in America are banned. Now the only thing you're talking about is the semi-automatic weapons and some attachments, but the attachments that class. Okay, so technically speaking, an assault weapon is automatic and semi-automatic under very specific conditions, with pistol grips, suppressor, and bump stock and other kind of stocks. But the reason for those attachments is not to make the weapon deadlier. Very more often than not, it's for user safety. Pistol grip is for one is increased accuracy. That does actually make the weapon deadlier is the pistol grip, but the but it's also for uh, shoulder safety and the silencer, which this just if you think a silencer works the same way it does in a video game or a movie, you've never fired a gun in your life. I've never fired a gun, and I know this. Silencers do not make a weapon silent. They they are literally their only actual use is for user ear protection. That's the only reason they exist. They do not make weapons silent at all. It is still as loud as a jackhammer. It is for user ear protection. And this is what it's amazing. You can always tell when someone does not know what they're talking about when it comes to guns when they say stuff like putting a silencer. I think it was like Hillary Clinton said this actually. I think a couple months ago. It was after Vegas. After the Vegas shooting, Hillary put out a tweet, and I don't really care what Hillary Clinton has to say. It's the election's over. I really couldn't care less, but this is relevant. She said, "Imagine if you had a silencer," and she got very correctly ripped for this because if you put a silencer on an automatic weapon, the silencer will melt and make it. If there had been a silencer on his weapon, that would have saved dozens of lives because the silencer would have melted and made the gun defunct. It wouldn't have been able to fire. Probably would have broken the gun entirely. So we've established a couple things. The reasoning behind the Second Amendment and why it is important, because the armed population needs to be able to, and this is why I was talking about automatic weapons and assault weapons. We've established what assault weapons are. This is why it's relevant. The reason that that automatic weapons were banned, it was pretty widely accepted. No one really had a serious problem with banning the automatic weapons, but there's a serious issue when it comes to banning semi-automatic weapons for multiple reasons. One, I kind of touched on this on the Parkland episode. If you ban one, you effectively ban them all, or you do nothing. There is no real physical distinction between a a Ruger Mini 14 and an AR-15 or an M4. Like all of these guns are effectively the exact same gun. And so when people talk about banning the AR-15, they either mean banning all semi-automatic assault weapons, which Marco Rubio happened to mention at the CNN town hall to resounding applause, and this is why people have a problem. There are gun control measures that should be taken seriously, and I disagree with the Republicans on this. The Republicans very often make the assumption that everything is a slippery slope. I do think that some things are slippery slope. For example, banning an AR-15 would absolutely be under the concept of slippery slope, because then the next shooting would happen with an M4, and then you would have to ban the M4. That's how that goes. But stuff like banning pistol grips, I could probably see that happening. Banning the bump stock, that's already a thing. The setting the legal age limit, I think that's a good idea. One that I didn't really that one that I mentioned that I didn't really get into was the mental health evaluation, which kind of does the same application I had mentioned with with gun training. It's a legal gray area. It's hard to tell if something can truly be infringed or not, and this is why it's annoyingly vague. So, not letting people own a gun because they don't do training with it, that would probably be seen as infringement. Not letting a person own a gun, depending on, now it depends on how strict the mental exam is, but if it's too strict, that would also be probably seen as infringement. I remember someone saying that, there was a, I don't know what bill it was, but I had just heard this, and this grain of salt, because I cannot confirm this. I don't know where I heard it, but I did hear that this was a thing, that something got shot down for this issue, for gun control with mental acuity, and it was and the legal restrictions were vastly different than what they should have been. Stuff like elderly people not being able to manage their own finances was registered as a mental health disorder. I'm pretty sure that most of us can agree that that is not a mental disorder. And just because I can't count my and just because I can't manage my finances are hard enough to manage by yourself. Uh, that shouldn't be a mental block to not owning a firearm. Other things that should not be a block to owning a firearm, uh, probably things like, or things that things that should be a block. Uh, previous uh, tendencies of violence, especially violence that where you are the provocateur and not acting in self defense, and you know, stuff that are like the really hard hitting cases of mental disorder like schizophrenia. And I actually don't know how the what the current law is on mental health with guns, but all of this ties into the first point of the necessity of the Second Amendment, which many people don't seem to understand. Many on the and I hesitate to say the left, but the left, there are several gun advocates or gun control advocates on the left who basically make the argument that there is no real reason to own a gun in America. To which the answer is that is provably blatantly false. And few people on the right tend to make this argument. They tend to say that the guns save more lives than end lives, which I I'm actually not going to comment on that because I don't know. I have not seen the statistics whether or not guns save or end more lives. I've seen varying statistics on that, but it gets into a really hard area because the moment that you say that you need guns, it's not that you need guns for the sake of guns. It's that you need guns for personal self-defense and for the prevention of government tyranny that does not already exist. To a lot of people, that sounds like you own a gun just for the sake of owning a gun. And if you counter that, a lot of people will say, and this is a very fair argument, and it's one that you don't, that there really isn't an argument against, is the sacrifice of innocent, what people will ask is do you then, so then you're saying that the sacrifice of innocent lives is the price that you pay for a free country. And it's really, really hard to counter this because obviously no one wants innocent people dead. And obviously I don't want innocent people dead. I would. This is what I mean. It is a really hard thing to counter because obviously nobody wants innocent people to die. And the argument is well, if you don't want that, then why are you advocating for this? And you're saying it's necessary, to which it is. A lot more people would probably die without guns than with guns. And this is and granted that's on a crime thing again, but I'm talking more about like government tyranny, stuff like the illegal spying. Now, granted, I don't really think that the U.S. government will become tyrannical, and then everybody else will then again say, well, if you don't think it's going to become tyrannical, then your argument is invalid. It is a very hard argument for constitutionalists to make. It's and it's a fair one. It is fairly hard to make because it's because there isn't a right answer that doesn't create a counter to it. Either you say this is a free country and the sacrifice of innocent lives is just the price that you pay, or you say I don't want to sacrifice, and then you say but I don't want to sacrifice innocent lives, but then you say but the government's probably not going to do it, and then you say but we need it anyway. You can see how this is a problem. And the underlying truth is that you do need it. America needs its guns, and as much as people will very easily disagree with me on that, America does need its guns for multiple reasons. But the if you do genuinely believe that America is never going to become tyrannical, then which I don't really know. That's why it's necessary. It's like I am not 100% sure. I don't think it probably. I don't think it will. I think that if the government became tyrannical, I think the military would actually revolt before the American people. I don't think the military would comply with unconstitutional orders. Um, but if America ever did really become tyrannical, you would need the guns. It is a preventative measure. It does stop government tyranny from happening in the first place. And if government tyranny does happen, then it's the only then a the American people need a fighting chance against the U.S. military. And this is why I had said earlier that as a constitutionalist, I disagreed with banning automatic weapons. As a person, I do agree with banning automatic weapons for the purpose of I do feel that this still complies with constitutionality. I think that in this sense, a good read of the Constitution would be the American populace needs enough firepower to have a fighting chance against the U.S. military. To which a lot of people will say, like one guy in a tank could probably take out half of the U.S. population, no problem. Which is probably true. I think there was a story a long time ago about a guy who made like a homemade tank and basically demolished half of his hometown. But uh, but almost every revolution has been fought with the winning side having less resources. I mean, just look at the American Revolution. You've The guerrilla warfare style tactics is what enables a smaller fighting force to win a war. And with more guns than there are people in the United States and a third of the American population owning guns, I don't really see a scenario where the military just completely roll over the entire the entire country. The guns are necessary. As hard as it is to argue, because there's always a counter argument, the guns are necessary for the continued safety of American security. That is my takeaway from my understanding of the Constitution and my understanding of the founding fathers' interpretation and vision. Now, with all of that said, what are the constitutional uh, what are constitutional gun control measures that make sense and are not going to create a national crisis? I've already established a couple of them. Uh, Other ones that I have brought up that have been brought up, which I'll just go case by case here. I do not think that there should be a gun registry because while I do think that a gun registry would be constitutional, it is a very dangerous territory. And I actually don't know how that would hold up in the Supreme Court. Because that's something that a lot of people do advocate is a full gun registry. And that is very dangerous territory for a lot of reasons. Uh, other other measures that I have seen, I think this one was actually endorsed by President Trump, was kind of like civilian arrest or being able to take away guns from mentally ill family members without the police. Uh, and I don't know the full extent of. I don't think there's actually been a bill that's been introduced, so I can't do a reading of it. But I do think that that is probably a good idea if it's implemented correctly. I guess just the major three things that you cannot do when it comes to gun control is you can't have a ban of semi-automatic weapons, and there are some attachments. I think probably the limit would be attachments, but if you ban effectively any semi-automatic weapon, you you got to ban them all. I mean, it really that is like the ultimate of the slippery slope scenario. If you ban the AR-15, you either, as I said in the last video, create a useless law or you have to make sweeping measures. So you cannot do that. That would be unconstitutional. That would be just struck down immediately by the Supreme Court. The other one would be a gun confiscation, like they had in, or a gun buyback, kind of like they had in Australia. If you think for a second that a gun confiscation that America would allow a gun confiscation on a mass scale, do you want Civil War II? Because that's how you get Civil War II. I want to see you try taking the guns out of Texas. Good luck. Then you'll see what the guns were for. And the other thing is that you can't. And this is the most ambiguous one. Behavior and skill and training are all things that are very subject to constitutional review. Uh, you know, legally requiring people to train with their weapons before being able to buy them, I do think is probably unconstitutional. Uh, Mental health evaluation, like I had said earlier, if it gets pushed too far, if you're not a danger to society or to yourself, I do think that is unconstitutional. There are a lot of things here that need to be avoided, and it's the things that people are pushing for, which is dangerous and sad. And people say we don't want to ban all the guns, just the scary looking ones. It gets it gets hard to make these kinds of arguments all day long. That nobody seems to be able to just sit down and have a national conversation on what is actually feasible. It's like CNN town hall that did not that was not useful. That did nothing but put blame on people who did not deserve it. Oh, okay, and that's another thing that I can address. So, people, I keep seeing this. People want to blame someone on Parkland, and who they want to blame it on is gun owners, and more specifically, the the GOP Congress, and more specifically, the NRA. Let me explain why this is phallus. Why this is irrelevant on several matters. People want someone to blame for Parkland. Now, for some reason, they're not blaming the shooter. They always want to blame the the reason that he had a gun, and then everybody immediately turns to the GOP. And here is the serious problem. And this is besides gun control. Like this does nothing to do with guns. This is just human nature. Demonization is so much more powerful than people give it credit for. Because what has basically come out of Parkland is a entire culture of people that basically feel like if you are not in favor of a full gun confiscation in America, you advocate for the murder of 17 children. And they and to most people, like, that can't be, like, no one understands the concept of gun rights. All it is just either you are pro gun control or you're pro child murder. That's the only issue that they see. And so when you have the GOP, so this all obviously ties into the GOP and the NRA. The NRA is not a terrorist organization in the slightest, at all, not even close. Let me break something down to you. People say this constant thing. So there's a series of time points where you go from blaming the people who sold him a gun, except the background check was clean, and for some reason no one's blaming Sheriff Israel, which is another thing that annoys me. But basically, everyone likes to blame the GOP for not being in gun control. But the way that most people see it is that, or at least this is the way the liberal left has taken it, and this is why demonization is so dangerous, is that anyone who advocates for anything other than gun control is pro-child murder. Is that they're just gun-toting things, except for the fact that logically, most people would assume that not that the entire GOP, like no one could be that evil, that it has to be like it has to be money based, because no one could be so evil as to want to advocate for child murder. But no one understands that it's not about the but it's not about that. It's about gun rights, and no one understands the concept of gun rights. All they see is gun control or murder, and they need someone to blame. So they look to the GOP and they say, okay, there's no way that all of these people who are not allowing us to do, these are cruel people, but there's no way that every single person of the GOP is so soulless and cruel that they would block us from putting out gun control unless unless it was for money. It was for blood money. So then everyone looks to the NRA. Okay, let me break something down for you. The NRA donations to Republicans, not only is it effectively like pennies, like seriously, the NRA gave like $5,000 to Marco Rubio. Are you serious? That's nothing. I mean, it's $5,000, and people were saying the same thing about President Trump, and it's like, President Trump makes more in a week than the NRA donated in the entire election cycle. No one in the entire GOP Congress is owned by the NRA. Let me make this very clear. Not one single vote on guns has ever been swayed by an NRA donation. Ever. The reason why is because the NRA does not donate to people in order to get their in order for the to swing their policy. The NRA donates to people who already support their policy, and they always have. The NRA donates to people who are pro gun rights. People are not pro gun rights because they got money from the NRA. Nobody who has ever accepted no vote has ever been swayed by an NRA donation. And this is what no one can comprehend. Everyone calls the NRA terrorists. At the CNN town hall, they were screaming from the crowds when Dana Lash got on stage, screaming murderer and burn her as she was leaving. This is why demonization is so cruel and evil. Because now no one can comprehend, because now there is no debate. There is either you're with me or you're Satan. You advocate for child murder, screaming that she was a murderer, that the NRA is all fueled by blood money and they have the entire GOP in their pockets. This could not be further from the truth. This is absolutely insane. No one wants children to die. No one wants gun. And the NRA doesn't, as if I remember correctly, the NRA gets a grand total of $0 from gun manufacturers. Don't quote me on that, but I have heard that in the past. The NRA is if I remember correctly, the NRA is a nonprofit. No one signs up for the NRA to get their uh, discounts on anything. Which brings me to another topic. And this is more free market and private industry, and that's definitely for another video in time. But through all this fiasco with the NRA, Delta, a lot of companies pulled their discounts from the NRA. By the way, every single one of those companies lost stock. Like seriously, like Delta lost so it was like $40 million. I think that Delta lost because of that. And so, but that which that's how the free market works. How the free market doesn't work is how Georgia. I don't know if it was. I think it was Georgia. How Georgia handled it, where they suddenly put in state legislation against Delta, who has their HQ. I'm pretty sure it's Georgia. Who has their HQ in Georgia? What? What? And this is fundamentally wrong. This is the opposite of this is what everybody harped on the Obamacare mandate for. This is the government saying that this is the government punishing private sector directly. This is not the government competing. This is the government punishing private industry for their policy. That is fundamentally against all of American values. I vehemently opposed it when it was presented, and I am amazed that it got passed. It should not be passed. And that was a republic. It was so stupid. It was wrong. Point of all this is that the NRA is not responsible for the shooting. The GOP is not in the pocket of the NRA. People just have differing opinions, and other people can't recognize that. And because of the demonization in America and how people are treated based on their political views, there is no longer a solid political discourse, and people turn to emotions rather than any kind of logical understanding. and that should never be how America runs. And unfortunately, that is far too prevalent in American society today. So I'm going to I'm gonna end I'm gonna end this here. Good talk. I got a little bit out. Still need to think of an intro for or outro for this, but see you when I see you. Probably tomorrow. Peace.